Hi, everybody, and welcome to our week one lecture, Introducing U.S. Intelligence. So let's first define what intelligence is. And intelligence is going to be information that is provided about an adversary that is going to give the agency that is collecting that information an advantage. This is going to deal with all things that should be known in advance of initiating a course of action against your adversary. It's a prelude to taking action, and it's generally one that serves the national interest. So, how is information different from intelligence? Information is unprocessed material. It's what we would refer to as sort of raw data. Um, we want to analyze that information to develop it into intelligence. Not all information is going to be relevant, and some might be misleading. Some might take you down, rabbit holes and paths that just don't bear any fruit. But it is all that raw data, that raw information that needs to be vetted and culled in order to determine what contributes to the overall intelligence goals of an agency. Like I said, information can be ambiguous and it can be misleading. And this is why we need to analyze the information and vet that information prior to determining what becomes intelligence. What we want from intelligence is something called a decision advantage. And a decision advantage is when you know more about a competitor, which gives you the advantage in decision making and your response and preparing actions relative to your competitor. What we seek most in the intelligence world is actionable intelligence, and that's going to be intelligence that results directly in a decision that results in an action that we can take against an organization that is under surveillance. Some people argue that intelligence should only be actionable, that intelligence shouldn't be there just to provide information, that intelligence is only truly intelligence if it is something that can be acted upon. There's also something called disinformation, and this is when information is intentionally false and it's presented by adversaries in order to throw off those who gather intelligence and in order to disguise what it is that they're doing and to throw competitors off, to create confusion, to create failed actions, etc. There are different categories of intelligence, and the first that we're going to cover is tactical intelligence, and that is intelligence that's going to be used by on-ground forces. So, for example, this would be intelligence on where drug dealers are operating, intelligence on gang behavior, what gang is at war with what gang, etc. Things so that information know how to respond. Law enforcement knows how to respond. The next is strategic intelligence, and this is going to be used by senior leaders and policymakers. They're going to look at broad topics and focus on where issues are headed in the future. So, for example, they're going to be looking at intelligence that answers questions like, where is Iran currently in the process of obtaining nuclear weapons? Where are they in the process of development? What materials do they have access to? What materials are still out of their reach, etc. There's operational intelligence, which is typically used by the military, and it falls somewhere between tactical and somewhere between strategic intelligence, and it's used in battalion forces. And then there's foreign versus domestic intelligence. Intelligence on foreign countries, foreign terrorist organizations, etc., versus the intelligence that we gather on what's happening within the United States borders, which would be domestic intelligence. So U.S. terrorist organizations, crime organizations, etc., that would fall under the rubric of domestic intelligence. So let's talk about some of the functions of intelligence agencies. We've already talked about the first one, and that is collection. That is collection of information, gathering that raw data so that we can analyze it and develop it into intelligence. And we collect information from a myriad of sources, and that's going to include satellites, cell phones, computers, all kinds of technologies, etc. There's a lot of different outlets from which we can gather that raw information. Analysis is the next function of intelligence agencies, and that's where we take that raw information, we vet it to see how accurate is this, or how inaccurate. We analyze it. It must be interpreted, linked, and contextualized, so that we know how to make plans of response, plans of action. And so we also know where to get that information to the proper agencies in order to take the next proper steps. Analysis is often a feature that is blamed for poor intelligence, that the raw data, the information is there, but it's not properly analyzed. And if it's not properly analyzed, then those next steps can't be taken. And those next steps are, what's the agency that should be, evaluating this intelligence, developing a plan of response, etc. So oftentimes the analysis function is where the bottleneck of intelligence can happen. There's also counterintelligence. This is going to be where we protect your information and your intelligence from other intelligence gathering agencies and organizations that are trying to get raw data about our government functions, and our intelligence community. The primary method of counterintelligence is going to be keeping information contained through secret classifications. Okay, so making things classified, requiring that only people with secret clearances or top secret clearances have access and approval to see that information. But it's also done by seeking out breaches within an agency, and providing false intelligence to see if there's a mole or a spy within the agency and where that intelligence goes. Agencies will put out that false lead to just a handful of people that maybe they suspect are working for another intelligence agency, to see where does that information go, to see if they can root out a spy or a mole in an agency. And finally, sending out disinformation, and that's going to be false information that will make those other agencies essentially obtain incorrect intelligence, and it'll go in the wrong direction. Covert operations are often methods that are utilized by the intelligence community, and these are methods of carrying out counterintelligence. They're not overly common, but they are typically carried out by the military or by paramilitary organizations that are based on intelligence that United States intelligence agencies have gathered in order to put us into a position of advantage. So, for example, the killing of Osama bin Laden was a covert operation where they were gathering all sorts of intelligence about where they thought he was located, vetting that information, vetting that data, finding out, yes, it looks like this is accurate. Okay, what's our next plan of action? And they developed an entire plan to breach the compound in which he was living, execute him, remove his cadaver, and bring it home for confirmation. So that would be an example of a covert operation. Plausible deniability is something also commonly used by intelligence agencies. This is a necessary element of covert operations, and this is where credible deniability is created so that the covert operation, whether it succeeds or whether it fails, cannot be tied back to the United States. Essentially, we make it so hard to determine whether or not we were involved that there's no fingerprint, there's no direct evidence that the United States was involved, which gives us plausible deniability. There's also intelligent management, which is the organizing and processing of daily intelligence and information that comes into the organization, securely storing that information, and then disseminating that intelligence to the decision makers who need that information in order to make decisions about what next steps and plan of actions are going to be. And finally, I want you to be aware that in the United States intelligence community is made up of 18 intelligence organizations. All of these organizations operate within the executive branch of government. They work both independently and collaboratively within the executive branch in order to conduct foreign relations and national security operations.